Slimeball, slippery, leaker, liar, weak, jail. Just some of the words the President of the United States has used over the past few days to describe the former head of the FBI and what should happen to him, James Comey. Of course, Comey has used a few choice words of his own to describe the president in his new book out today and in his first series of interviews since his firing last May.
I think he's morally unfit to be president. A mafia boss.
Are you thinking President Trump's a liar?
Yes. Yeah.
Statements like those are certainly earning Comey headlines, but what do they do to the credibility of the still ongoing Russia investigation? Then there's that newly launched legal spin-off series starring Michael Cohen, which yesterday brought us a plot twist I'd say no one expected, that the client he'd been fighting to keep a secret was Fox News' Sean Hannity. Of course, Hannity himself has a slightly different explanation of it all.
Here's the truth. Michael Cohen never represented me in any legal matter. I never retained his services. I never received an invoice. I never paid Michael Cohen for legal fees. I did have occasional brief conversations with Michael Cohen. He's a great attorney about legal questions I had, or I was looking for input and perspective.
He never paid him, except there was this on Hannity's radio show earlier in that same day.
You know, I might have handed him $10. I definitely want you attorney-client privilege on this, something like that.
As Washington Post Kyle Swenson put it, that's a definition of attorney-client privilege straight out of Breaking Bad. The judge also ruled yesterday in Cohen's case that the president is not allowed to have a first look at those 10 boxes of documents and electronic devices taken from his personal attorney's home, office, and hotel room. The main reason Trump keeps tweeting that attorney-client privilege is now a thing of the past. Joining me now on all of this and more is Harvey Silverglate. Harvey's a civil liberties attorney and WGBH contributor. Hey there, Harvey. Martha Coakley, former attorney general and federal organized crime prosecutor. She worked with Mueller, now partner at Foley Hoag. Good to see you, Martha Coakley. Let me start with you. Conventional wisdom has it that the President of the United States has more to fear from this Cohen investigation than he does from Mueller himself. Do you agree with that?
Well, who knows what conventional wisdom is worth? Only Trump will know that. But I think he has reason to be afraid of both of these investigations, not the least of which is whatever is happening in the District of New York, federal crimes and maybe state crimes are not pardonable for either, for instance, his Mickey Cohen or for himself.
Which would you worry more about there, Harvey Silverglate?
Well, I would worry about the federal investigation. And the reason for that is that you can manage to concoct a federal crime out of almost anything. If anybody's private records are searched, I guarantee you there will be some arguable federal felonies because federal law is so vague and so malleable. So these kinds of investigations are very dangerous. And the fact that this is a lawyer and clients of his are having their privilege violated adds another layer of outrage.
Well, you don't know that the privilege is being violated. There's going to be a special master or some Justice Department committee. You know, I met you, you forget this, 30 years ago when I moved here, when I did some work for a bunch of lawyers, including you, when the Justice Department was going after the lawyers of alleged drug dealers in an attempt to get through the back door. But this is pretty unusual to go after, to raid a lawyer's office. You got to have cross a pretty high threshold with a judge to even get a warrant, don't you?
Well, what's unusual is that they proceeded by search rather than subpoena. When you're dealing with a lawyer, that happens to be quite unusual in the law.
Well, they're worried he was going to destroy records. Isn't that isn't that the reason you go?
You need a reason for making an assertion that a lawyer is likely to destroy records.
Do you worry about the attorney-client privilege thing? I mean, Trump is saying it's the end of the attorney-client privilege, as I just saw it. And while there will be some safeguards in place, courtesy of this judge here, it is pretty extraordinary. And it is a chilling kind of thing for people who are going out to hire a lawyer.
Sure. Look, I'm on that side of the business now where that is sacrosanct, except in cases where there's a criminal fraud exception or where there's no client relationship. I mean, one of the issues with Mr. Cohen is whether he's a fixer who happens to have a law degree or whether these things are protected by privilege. But even though it's unusual, it has happened, and we have systems for it. And so the judge is deciding whether there'll be a magistrate or she'll let the district do the taint team.
Did you ever do this when you were Attorney General?
When I worked in the office, I was involved with cases where we had taint teams. And as Attorney General, we've had that issue. My predecessor, Scott Harshbarger, had a big case where the lawyers working for an insurance defense side were investigated and prosecuted.
You don't know if either of you know this. In this state, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you'll know this. This is a two-party consent state in terms of taping people, is
yes.
it not? Is New York a one-party state?
Yes.
Is that what
Yes.
the deal is? So as long as Cohen did this, obviously voluntarily, the fact that his client did not, or that the person with whom he spoke did not, makes all this stuff vulnerable and reachable, does it not? Unless there's an attorney-client privilege.
In federal court and in state court, right, Harvey?
Yes.
And he was a taper, it seems, not just documents, but he has tapes of many of his conversations.
You know, I should have said, for those who have not been following your continued skepticism, I think is a euphemism, about Mueller's appointment to begin with. Can you give us like a 30-second thing about why you are not comfortable with Bob Mueller as special counsel?
Well, I have a personal reason. When he was the U.S. Attorney here, he actually sent an informant wired into my office in order to try to get me to allow that informant to do an affidavit under oath. As soon as the informant said that he would swear to a falsity, I threw him out of my office, and I saw the little box he was wired. Well, that's really a terrible thing to do to a lawyer.
And Mueller subsequently admitted to you, by the way, that he had done it.
He did, and he sort of apologized. Now, he had no reason to think I would do that. That's the point. He was taking the words of a real scuzzball that I would do that, but he had no reason to believe it.
Would that cause you concern? You work with Mueller. Does that cause you concern, that kind of story?
Look, there are things that federal judges have done, or prosecutors, or FBI agents, but defense counsel as well, that give me pause about what's happened to the level of ethics here. I do know that the warrants had to be okayed by a judge. I do know that what they've seized, judges are going to look at. And so I think that Bob Mueller, with that case in mind, obviously, that's a concern to you, and I understand that. But he's a thoughtful guy. He's methodical. And what he has done will be open to review, and I'm sure motions to suppress and all of the mechanisms that are available.
Let's talk about another thoughtful. What's the other adjective you just used? Thoughtful what guy?
Methodical.
Methodical guy. Sean Hannity. What do you make of this thing? I mean, Sean Hannity, just depending on when you listened to him yesterday, read his tweets, said, I don't know, it was sort of like one of those cocktail party kind of discussions thing. But then he did what I read to you a couple of minutes ago, the $10 thing. I assume, and I'm paraphrasing, I assume that attorney-client privilege would attach.
Well, he's
what do you think is
walking
going
all
on
of this back. I think he was as surprised as anybody. But
Hannity.
Cohen said, I have 10 clients, 3 were legal, and the other 7 I were as a business advisor to. And then it turns out that it's Sean Hannity. The third guy were the other 2 he's been a fixer for affairs, incidents with women. So
the other
Hannity,
2, including the President of the United States.
the President of the United States and the head of the GNC, who had paid $1.4 million in a settlement. So
to a playmate, he got pregnant. This Braude guy. That's
correct.
Sort of,
So we know what kind of fixing he was doing for the other 2 clients.
Here we have Sean Hannity, who's an innocent victim of all of this because he wasn't under investigation. Suddenly, the world learns that he had material that was seized, and the team will be going over the seized material. That's a terrible violation of this guy's privacy.
Well, you know, I just go even one step further. I think, I don't know the law, but I'm sure you two do. The mere release of his name, it seems to me, is that
terrible
privilege in certain circumstances? Cohen didn't want to release this thing. Cohen's lawyer didn't want to release this. Why should the world know unless there's evidence of impropriety or crimes on the part of Sean Hannity? Why should we even know his name?
That's a fair question. I think that's a fair question for the judge, because that could have been.
It's too late. It's sort of like the genie's out of the proverbial bottle.
Cat is out of the bag, but
whatever it is,
same thing.
Yeah.
But she could have taken that off the record and pounded it. They didn't have to do that in open court.
She's an experienced judge. She should have known better.
When you said innocent victim, maybe legally, yes. Here is Sean Hannity,
though, of course on
TV. Just wait a second. On TV. Describing some of the behavior of the federal government vis-a-vis Cohen. Just listen to what he had to say and what he didn't say.
We have now entered a dangerous new phase, and there's no turning back from this. Mueller is out to get the president, and it appears at any cost. This is now officially an all-hands-on-deck effort to totally malign and, if possible, impeach the president of the United States.
Now, as viewers, any concern about the fact that he didn't think it was appropriate at any time? I think 16 times he talked about this, as far as I understand, over the last several weeks. Not once did he disclose that he had some relationship, which he described yesterday as attorney-client with the guy he was talking about. Does that concern you at all?
I mean, so the guy was not a fully ethical newsman, right? He deserved to have a Fourth Amendment rights violated.
I'm not saying that, but does that concern you?
Of course it concerns
does it
me.
concern you?
Well, even Professor Dershowitz, who's been a big defender of many of this, called him on it personally and said, you should have disclosed that you had, whatever this relationship was, attorney-client or not, you should have disclosed you had a personal relationship.
By the way,
with this
Fox News
individual.
doesn't seem to care either. Here's what they said in a statement today. While Fox News was unaware of Sean Hannity's informal relationship with Michael Cohen, was surprised by the announcement in court yesterday, we have reviewed the matter and spoken to Sean, and he continues to have our full support. Let's go to James Comey for a second. I assume you haven't read the book yet. It just came out today. What's your takeaway from at least the first couple of interviews? What's the one or two things that has stuck with you, Martha?
So I probably won't read the book first. I don't think there's anything in it that we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I gather from what I've seen, the tone of it is somewhat on the junior high school level, perhaps, with the president who is known to tweet at that level and otherwise. And so I'm just not interested in seeing, two grown men act like they're in the 7th grade back in the schoolyard.
How about you?
I've ordered the book. It arrived today. I will read it, and I think it will just confirm my view that the guy was never qualified for any high position in the Department
Which
of Justice.
guy?
Which guy?
You're talking about
Comey.
And why is that, Harvey?
Because he's a petty little despot who is fighting with another petty little despot, and it's a very unseemly battle, a pox on both their houses, to quote Bill Shakespeare.
Well, at least it's even. Some of us call him William, who don't know him quite so well. You were a Hillary Clinton supporter. Here's part of what he had to say. This is James Comey about Hillary Clinton when he was with George Stephanopoulos. Listen.
I even hope Hillary Clinton at least reads those parts of the book, because I think she will walk away saying, you know what, I still think that guy's an idiot, but he's kind of an honest idiot. And he's trying to do the right thing here.
And by the way, I made a mistake. It was USA Today. He also said in the interview the other night that if he had to do over again, I'm paraphrasing, pretty big admission, he would not have used the words extreme carelessness in that July press conference, which Hillary Clinton believes started her down the road to defeat. You think she'll feel better after she watches this?
Absolutely not.
Do you feel better at all?
Absolutely not. He announced that she was under investigation, contrary to every rule they've ever followed, while Trump was also under investigation. And then he made it worse by anticipating things that were totally outside the scope of what he had to do.
But you were an attorney general. What would you have done when he said what he said Sunday night and said, I was worried that if she won that election, which we thought everybody would do, and the American people subsequently found out that we had reopened the investigation, they would say, and I agree with him, by the way, that we killed this, we kept this quiet because we didn't want to hurt chances for election. What would you have done under similar circumstances?
He did the wrong thing, and it wasn't his job to make that call because that was the rule. And why didn't he disclose that Trump was under investigation?
And since when do FBI directors make public announcements as to the status of an investigation?
Well, that's the whole point.
It's
They've never
unheard
done
of.
it. And so he's anticipating, and I think it's not my original thought, but a lot of people feel that was more about his saving his own hide as opposed to saving Hillary's chances for the presidency.
We got to go. Harvey, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for your time. Martha Coakley.
Thank you.
Good to see you as well. Appreciate it.